Because you married one and
married one,
had an affair with the other.
Oh, you're so cruel, Mark.
At 74 years old, with a lifetime of fame, heartbreak, and unforgettable music behind him, Phil Collins has finally made a confession that no one saw coming. After decades of silence, he's revealed who truly held his heart all along. Was it regret, redemption, or a love that never died? The answer might just surprise you. Let's take a closer look into the story behind the confession. Early love and first marriage. Phil Collins is known around the world for his powerful voice, his heartfelt lyrics, and the unmistakable drumming that once shook stadiums. As the lead singer of Genesis and a wildly successful solo artist, Collins gave us classics like In the Air Tonight, Against All Odds, and Another Day in Paradise. But behind the fame, the Grammys, and the global tours was a man deeply shaped by one woman, his first wife, Andrea Bertarelli. Before he became a rock icon, before Genesis took the world by storm, Collins was just a teenager growing up in London. Even then, music was his passion. But something else quietly stirred in his young heart. Andrea, a girl he met in drama class when they were just 11 years old. Their early connection was sweet and innocent. They shared the same interests and got along effortlessly. But as young love often does, life pulled them apart. Andrea's family emigrated to Canada, and the two lost contact. Years passed. Phil's career started to take shape. He became the drummer for Genesis in 1970. And when Peter Gabriel left in 1975, Collins stepped into the spotlight as lead vocalist. He was now the face of a band that would soon become legendary. But even as his star began to rise, something inside him remained incomplete. Then came a twist of fate. In the mid-1970s, while touring in North America with Genesis, Collins reconnected with Andrea in Vancouver, Canada. They hadn't seen each other in years, but the spark that once existed between them was still alive. This wasn't just a reunion, it was the start of something life-changing. After rekindling their bond, the two fell in love all over again. Their story had come full circle. In 1975, Phil Collins and Andrea Bertarelli got married. For Phil, it felt like everything was finally falling into place, not just professionally, but personally. Andrea had a daughter, Jolie, from a previous relationship, and Phil didn't hesitate to adopt her as his own. He embraced fatherhood with warmth and pride, later saying how much he loved being a dad. The following year, in 1976, Phil and Andrea had a son together, Simon Collins. The late 70s were a whirlwind. Genesis was in high demand, and Phil was constantly on the road or in the studio. The long absences took a toll on Andrea. In later interviews, she described feeling alone and neglected, struggling to maintain a relationship with someone who was rarely home. The very success that had brought them together was now keeping them apart. Tension grew. Collins tried to balance his career with family life, but the pressure was overwhelming. He began to pour his emotions into songwriting, his heartbreak, frustration, and guilt turning into music that would later resonate with millions. Songs like Please Don't Ask and Misunderstanding weren't just lyrics. They were diary entries of a marriage in distress. By the 1980s, the strain became too much. Phil and Andrea divorced after 5 years of marriage. It was a painful ending to what had once been a beautiful story of young love rediscovered. The separation marked a turning point in Collins's life, emotionally and creatively. Following the divorce, Collins entered one of the most prolific and emotionally raw periods of his career. His debut solo album, Face Value, released in 1981, was drenched in sorrow and longing. The lead single, In the Air Tonight, became a massive hit and is still considered one of the most haunting breakup songs of all time. After the divorce from Andrea, Collins was so heartbroken that it bled into his music, changed him forever. Let's take a look at how he tried to move on and rebuild his life. Second marriage, affairs, and heartbreak. The next chapter in his story began with a new woman, Jill Tavelman, the American who would become his second wife. Phil Collins met Jill Tavelman in the early 1980s. Unlike his past relationships, Jill wasn't from the music industry. She was quiet, reserved, and elegant. Traits that seemed to balance Phil's intense, fast-paced lifestyle. For a while, it seemed like this new relationship might bring him the stability he longed for. In 1984, they married, and the following years gave Collins a taste of the family life he had always wanted, but struggled to maintain. 5 years into their marriage, in 1989, Phil and Jill welcomed a daughter, Lily Collins, who would later become a well-known actress and star of the Netflix series Emily in Paris. For Phil, Lily's birth was one of the brightest moments in an otherwise emotionally complex life. He was overjoyed to be a father again, and for a while, the family lived a quiet life in Switzerland, far from the chaos of tour buses and flashing lights. But fame never stays far behind. Collins's career was reaching a new peak. His albums were topping charts, and he was touring globally. In 1992, Genesis went on another world tour, one that would lead him into dangerous emotional territory. During this tour, Collins reconnected with Lavinia Lang, a former childhood classmate and ex-girlfriend from his school days at Barbara Speake Stage School. Despite being married to Jill, he rekindled the flame with Lavinia, and the two began an affair. In fact, he later admitted in interviews and his memoir that they had two separate affairs during this period. The affair with Lavinia wasn't just a fling, it was a sign that something deeper was broken. Phil admitted that he had fallen out of love with Jill. While the public saw the smiling photos and sold-out arenas, the truth was unfolding behind closed doors. The emotional distance between him and Jill widened, and Phil began to question everything about his marriage. In 1994, Collins made the decision to file for divorce from Jill Tavelman. The split was far from simple. Their daughter Lily was only 5 years old at the time, and the emotional impact on the family was heavy. The media quickly picked up on the story, and soon, headlines focused on the more controversial aspects of the breakup, especially the claim that Collins ended the marriage via fax. Though Phil denied the fax divorce story years later, the rumor stuck. In his 2016 memoir, Not Dead Yet, Collins clarified that while faxes were used to communicate during legal proceedings, the idea that he casually ended his marriage with a single cold message was exaggerated and unfair. Still, the damage to his public image and his personal life was already done. The divorce was finalized in 1996, and it came at a high financial cost. Collins agreed to pay £17 million in the settlement, one of the largest celebrity payouts at the time. While he never publicly complained about the amount, the sheer figure became part of the conversation around his stormy love life. Years later, the emotional toll of the divorce became clearer, especially through the lens of his daughter, Lily Collins. In her 2017 book, Unfiltered, Lily opened up about her childhood and her father's absence during key moments of her life. She wrote about struggling with self-worth and insecurity, blaming part of it on how her father's emotional distance had affected her as a child. Though she made it clear she loved her father, her words revealed wounds that hadn't fully healed. Despite everything, Collins has never painted himself as a victim. He has often spoken candidly about his mistakes and accepted the consequences of his choices. His willingness to put those regrets into words and into his music is part of what makes his story so deeply human. Songs like Can't Turn Back the Years and Both Sides of the Story feel like windows into his heart, offering raw, honest reflections on the relationships he couldn't save. The failure of his second marriage was another devastating chapter in Collins's life. But somehow, he found the courage to pick up the pieces and move on. Let's see where that path led him next. Third marriage and turbulence. By the late 1990s, Phil Collins had already endured 2 painful divorces, both of which left emotional and public scars. But in 1999, the legendary singer and drummer took another chance at love, this time with Oriane Sevi, a Swiss-born woman who had once worked as his translator during a 1994 tour. Their connection had started professionally, but it didn't take long for romance to blossom. After years of public heartbreak, Collins seemed to have found someone who truly understood him. Or so it seemed. Oriane was in her early 20s when she met Phil, who was more than 20 years her senior. Despite the age difference, their chemistry was strong. They shared a deep affection, and Phil seemed happier and more settled than he had in years. In 1999, they got married, and the ceremony marked a new beginning for the music icon who had spent so much of his life searching for personal peace. Not long after their marriage, the couple welcomed 2 sons, Nicholas, born in 2001, and Matthew, born in 2004. Becoming a father again later in life appeared to bring Phil a sense of joy and purpose. He was often photographed doting on his children, and for a time, the Collins household seemed to be a picture of happiness. However, the peace didn't last. In 2006, just 7 years after they married, Phil and Oriane divorced. The separation was not only emotionally difficult, but also historically expensive. Phil paid £25 million in the settlement, the largest celebrity divorce payout in British legal history at the time. The headlines were relentless. Once again, Phil Collins's private pain was splashed across global tabloids. Many believed that this would be the end of their story. But as with so many things in Phil's life, nothing was simple or final. Following the divorce, Oriane moved on and eventually remarried, while Collins retreated from the public eye to focus on his health and recovery. He was quietly battling nerve damage, back surgeries, and depression, which only added to the emotional weight of the divorce. His music slowed, his stage presence faded, and he seemed to vanish from the spotlight altogether. But then, something unexpected happened. In 2015, nearly a decade after their divorce, Phil and Oriane reunited. The announcement shocked fans and media alike. Against all odds, and despite the painful breakup and enormous settlement, they found their way back to each other. They began living together in Miami with their sons, and for a while, it looked like a love story reborn. Sadly, the reunion didn't last. By 2020, their relationship had again fallen apart, this time in a very public and chaotic fashion. Oriane had secretly married another man, Thomas Bates, while still living in Phil's Miami mansion. When Collins discovered the truth, a bitter legal battle began. Oriane refused to vacate the home, and the situation turned into a dramatic court dispute that once again put Collins in the headlines, not for his music, but for heartbreak. After the collapse of his third marriage, Phil Collins found comfort and stability in a quieter relationship with Dana Tyler, a respected American television journalist. The two began dating in 2007, and for nearly a decade, they maintained a relatively private and low-key romance, far removed from the chaos that had surrounded Collins's previous relationships. As time passed, and multiple marriages crumbled behind him, Collins was finally forced to sit down and look at his life and career in a deeply retrospective way, both the triumphs and the toll they took. Career retrospective, from Genesis to stardom. When you trace his journey from a child actor in London to one of the most celebrated musicians of his generation, the story that unfolds is nothing short of remarkable. Phil Collins's first steps into the spotlight had nothing to do with a drum kit or a microphone. At the age of 13, he was already performing on the West End stage in London. One of his earliest roles was in the musical Oliver, where he appeared as the Artful Dodger and later as a member of Fagin's gang. Acting seemed like his destined path at first, but music was already taking root. While still a teenager, he was playing drums in various bands and learning the ropes of rhythm and stage presence. In 1970, at just 19 years old, Collins's life changed forever when he joined a then little-known progressive rock band called Genesis. Initially hired as the drummer, his sharp timing and crisp fills brought new energy to the group. Over the next few years, Genesis, fronted by Peter Gabriel, became known for their experimental sound and theatrical live shows. Collins was content staying behind the drum kit until fate pushed him forward. When Gabriel left the band in 1975, Genesis struggled to find a new frontman. After months of auditions, it was Collins, reluctantly at first, who stepped up to the mic. The decision would reshape both the band's future and his own. With Collins as the lead singer, Genesis moved toward a more accessible, radio-friendly sound, and the band's popularity soared. Albums like Duke and Invisible Touch became massive hits, especially in the US, where Genesis transformed from a cult progressive band into arena-filling rock stars. But Collins's ambition didn't stop there. In 1981, he released his debut solo album, Face Value, which featured the haunting hit In the Air Tonight. With its dark lyrics and iconic drum break, the song became an instant classic. It was more than just a hit single. It was a raw expression of personal pain following the breakdown of his first marriage. Collins had found his solo voice, and the world was listening. What followed was a decade of astonishing success. Collins delivered hit after hit, Against All Odds, One More Night, Take Me Home, and Another Day in Paradise. His music topped charts globally, and his emotional, everyman voice made him one of the most relatable artists of the era. Despite criticism from some corners of the rock world, who labeled him too commercial, Collins never stopped connecting with fans. He didn't just stay in music either. Collins ventured into film scoring and songwriting, most notably for Disney. His work on Tarzan included the song You'll Be in My Heart, which won him an Academy Award, a Golden Globe, and a Grammy Award. The song also showcased his ability to write for a new generation of listeners, cementing his status as a versatile, enduring talent. By the early 2000s, Phil Collins had sold over 150 million records worldwide across his solo work and time with Genesis. That figure placed him among the best-selling artists of all time. He had achieved something few musicians ever do: true dominance as both a solo artist and as part of a globally successful band. Still, success came at a price. As he looked back on his career, Collins admitted in interviews that the non-stop touring, recording, and pressure to stay at the top had taken a toll, not just on his body, but on his relationships and mental health. Physical toll of musical passion. Years of relentless touring, high-energy shows, and the physical demands of drumming eventually caught up with him. And when the pain took over, it changed everything. The first major blow came in 2001, when Collins suffered a severe spinal injury. The nerves in his upper vertebrae were damaged, affecting the way he could move and feel. The damage was so bad that he lost the ability to grip drumsticks properly. In a heartbreaking adaptation, he had to tape the sticks to his hands just to keep playing. For a man whose identity was deeply tied to rhythm and control, this was not just a physical injury, it was an emotional wound. As time went on, the condition worsened. Collins underwent back surgery in 2009, hoping it would relieve some of the pressure on his spine and help restore function. But the results were mixed. He returned to the stage in short bursts, but was clearly in pain. By 2015, he was forced to go under the knife again, this time for neck surgery to correct damage from years of poor posture while drumming. The outcome was sobering. Not only was the nerve damage irreversible, but Collins also developed a condition known as drop foot, a neuromuscular disorder that makes it hard to lift the front part of the foot, affecting balance and movement. Suddenly, even walking unaided became a challenge. The man who once moved effortlessly between a drum kit and a microphone now had to rely on a cane and a chair just to get through a performance. These escalating health issues eventually forced Collins to retire, first from drumming and then from touring altogether. In interviews, he revealed just how deeply the decision affected him. Speaking to a news channel, he admitted that not being able to play the drums anymore felt like losing a part of his soul. He said, "I'd love to, but I can barely hold a stick with this hand." The physical pain had become part of his daily life, and so had the emotional weight that came with it. Collins had always been a driven artist, one who poured himself fully into every note. But now, the thing he loved most had become the source of his suffering. For many fans, seeing him seated on stage during his final Genesis tour in 2021 to 2022, unable to play and visibly unwell, was heartbreaking. But for Collins, it was about more than pride. It was about saying goodbye on his own terms, even if the music sounded different. The health crisis also catalyzed a wave of introspection. No longer able to hide behind drum kits and world tours, Collins began reflecting more openly on his life, his choices, and his relationships. In multiple interviews, including with The Standard and AOL, he talked about how his injuries had slowed him down, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. He confessed that the forced stillness made him confront regrets he had long buried under the noise of fame. Most recently, Phil Collins opened up about his life in a way he never had before and made a surprising confession about the true love of his life. Let's tell you what he revealed. Phil Collins' candid confession. Phil Collins, the man behind some of the most iconic songs of the 1980s and 90s, has always worn his heart on his sleeve. But in a candid February 2025 interview, at the age of 74, he peeled back every layer, facing his health, battles, career regrets, and a profound emotional truth. Sitting for an interview with Mojo, Collins admitted something fans had long suspected, but never heard so plainly. "I'm very sick." He didn't sugarcoat the reality. It's the spinal injury from 2007, the nerve damage, the neck surgery in 2015, he explained, and the drop foot. That's not something you come back from. He said it quietly, but firmly. There was no self-pity, just honesty. Collins's health had been deteriorating for years, ever since his spinal damage in 2007 made it nearly impossible to drum. He had taped drumsticks to his hands just to get through performances. But by March 2022, after completing his final Genesis tour, he was done. He didn't step off the stage triumphantly. He stepped off knowing it would likely be the last time. "If I can't do what I did as well, I'd rather relax," he told People magazine. The words stung, especially for a man who built his life on rhythm and motion. The toll of his health issues was more than physical. It was spiritual. Speaking to CFJCtoday.com, Collins confessed with a bittersweet smile, "I've used up my air miles." He wasn't bitter, just tired. After decades of pouring his soul into every lyric, every tour, and every love lost, he admitted that he no longer felt the hunger to create new music. "I'm not looking to record again," he added. "Not because I don't care, because I've said what I needed to say." And that statement rings true. Phil Collins has long been known for his emotional transparency in music. In a revealing Playboy interview, he once explained that heartbreak was never something he was afraid to sing about. "I've always been fine being vulnerable," he said. "A lot of my solo music came from the split up of my first marriage. I couldn't not write about it. That first marriage, to Andrea Bertorelli, did more than break his heart. It shaped his career." In a conversation with The Guardian, Collins offered one of his most striking admissions. "My biggest regret. I owe my entire solo career to my first divorce. If Andrea hadn't left me in 1979, we wouldn't be here." That moment of honesty highlights the emotional paradox at the core of Collins's success. His greatest artistic breakthroughs were born from personal tragedy. And in 2025, as he looked back on everything, albums, tours, awards, he didn't talk about the fame. He talked about Andrea. Though they had divorced more than 4 decades earlier, Collins finally called her what he never had before in public: the love of my life. This confession came quietly, buried near the end of the interview, but it landed with the weight of a lifetime. Fans were stunned, not because Andrea was a stranger. She had been the subject of countless songs, but because after all these years, Collins had finally admitted she was it, the one, the woman he loved more than anyone. Their story had been complicated. They'd met as teens in drama class, lost touch, then reunited in Vancouver years later. Married in 1975, they had 2 children together, Simon and Joelle, whom Collins adopted. But by 1980, their marriage had crumbled under the weight of fame and distance. Still, it left a scar that would become a soundtrack. Songs like "If Leaving Me Is Easy," "Please Don't Ask," and the iconic "In the Air Tonight" carried the pain of that breakup. Collins never explicitly confirmed these songs were about Andrea, but the timeline, tone, and later admissions painted a clear picture. His art was, in many ways, a long love letter to the woman he couldn't hold on to. And now, as he confronts the limits of his body and the twilight of his career, he's finally naming that love fully and openly. This confession isn't just a romantic gesture. It's a final piece of emotional closure in a life defined by rhythm, heartbreak, and brutal honesty. For decades, Collins gave fans the most vulnerable version of himself through his music. But now, with age stripping away all pretense, he's offering something even rarer: raw reflection. Phil Collins doesn't need another album or another stage. His legacy is sealed. His music has carried generations through their own breakups, losses, and reconciliations. But perhaps his most powerful statement was made not in a song, but in a quiet moment of truth. The woman who shaped his pain was also the one who held his heart. As he once sang, "Take a look at me now." And we do. We see a man who dared to love loudly, hurt deeply, and share it all with the world. And in his final confessions, we hear the softest, truest echo of who he really is. Let's take a look at what legacy this great man left behind. A legacy not just of chart-topping hits, but of vulnerability, resilience, and a lifetime poured into every note he ever sang. Legacy of Phil Collins. Phil Collins's career is one of the most remarkable in modern music history. As both the drummer and lead vocalist for Genesis and a hugely successful solo artist, Collins achieved what very few musicians ever have. He became a household name in 2 separate arenas. Over the span of 5 decades, his music reached across generations and genres, blending rock, pop, and soul into something unmistakably his own. With over 150 million records sold worldwide, Phil Collins belongs to an elite class of global superstars. His solo albums like Face Value, No Jacket Required, and, but seriously delivered hit after hit, from In the Air Tonight to Against All Odds to Another Day in Paradise. Each song wasn't just a melody, it was an emotional experience. Collins turned his personal heartbreaks and challenges into relatable stories, and fans across the world connected with his raw honesty. But Collins wasn't just a singer, he was a musician's musician. His drumming style, especially with Genesis, was complex, dynamic, and powerful. He pioneered techniques like the gated reverb drum sound, which became a defining feature of 1980s pop and rock. Even when he stepped out from behind the drum kit to take center stage, the rhythm never left him. Every beat of his music felt intentional, pulsing with emotion. Beyond music charts and Grammys, Collins left a deep cultural footprint. His work has appeared in film soundtracks, TV shows, and sports events. In the Air Tonight alone has become one of the most instantly recognizable songs ever recorded, its iconic drum break forever etched into pop culture. And perhaps, just as powerfully, Phil Collins taught us that vulnerability wasn't weakness. He opened up about his personal battles, his divorces, his addiction, his health struggles, and he didn't hide from them. Instead, he turned pain into poetry. He showed that even at the height of fame, it was okay to fall, to feel, and to keep going. His influence stretches far beyond his own music. Countless artists, from Adele to Questlove, cite him as an inspiration. His drumming, songwriting, and emotional authenticity have helped shape the sound of modern pop and rock. Though his health may have silenced his drums, Phil Collins's legacy continues to echo through every heartfelt lyric and every fan still moved by his music. He wasn't just a performer. He was a storyteller, a craftsman, and a soul who dared to feel out loud. And that, above all, is what will endure. What are your thoughts on Phil Collins's love life and his heartfelt confessions so late in life? Do you think some loves never truly fade? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think.